Martin Vance had a word for his ex-wife, Bailey: nothing. She was the quiet domestic wife he'd traded in for Clara Saunders, a woman who lived her life in the glare of a smartphone camera. He had his corner office at Stratton Financial, the perfect trophy wife, and a future of limitless success. Bailey had a tiny bakery apartment, and he assumed a life of quiet regret. But Martin made one catastrophic mistake. He hosted a party he couldn't afford for a client he couldn't land. He forgot that in a city like New York, nothing is just a shadow. And he never ever imagined that the one man who could destroy his entire world, billionaire Joel Thorne, was desperately searching for the one nothing woman Martin had so carelessly thrown away. The first year of silence was the loudest. For Bailey Vance, life had shrunk to the 4-block radius around her small third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn. Her world was the scent of yeast, the warmth of her aging oven, and the quiet click of her laptop as she managed the online orders for Historic Bakes, a passion project that had become her lifeline. It was a humble existence, one that paid the rent, but just barely. Her divorce from Martin Vance had been finalized 13 months, 6 days, and she glanced at the clock about 4 hours ago. The settlement had been laughably small. Martin, a rising star at Stratton Financial, had successfully argued that Bailey, with her lack of career ambition, had contributed little to his financial success. "What did you even do, Bailey?" he'd asked, not unkindly, but with the chilling disinterest of a man inspecting a piece of furniture he was about to sell. "You hosted dinners. You picked out paint. I built the empire." His empire was a junior vice president title. His palace was a sterile glass-walled condo in Midtown, now occupied by him and Clara Saunders. Clara, with her 2 million Instagram followers, blinding white teeth, and a complete lack of indoor voice, was everything Bailey was not. She was loud. She was seen. She was, in Martin's words, a somebody. Bailey, by contrast, was a ghost in her own life. She wiped a smudge of flour from her cheek, her gray eyes scanning an order confirmation. A private client. An unusual request: 12 dozen puits d'amour, a complex 18th century French pastry. The order was anonymous, the payment clearing instantly with a note that was both curt and generous. "Do not substitute. 50% bonus upon successful delivery to the specified address. Tuesday, 6 p.m. sharp." This order would cover next month's rent. A sudden sharp vibration on her counter startled her. Her phone. The name flashing on the screen made her stomach clench: Martin Vance. She hadn't spoken to him since the ink dried on the divorce papers. She let it ring, her heart hammering against her ribs. It stopped, then immediately buzzed again. He was persistent. With a trembling hand she answered, "Bailey, thank God, I need you to do something." "No, hello, no, how are you?" "Martin." Her voice was rusty. "Listen, I'm in a jam. Clara's people-to-watch party is tonight, you know, the one Forbes is covering, and her caterer just bailed. The main one. The savory food. I need—" He sighed, the sound of a man deeply annoyed. "I need you to handle it." Bailey stared at the wall. He was asking her to cater his new wife's party. "Martin, I bake. I don't do savory. Not on that scale." "How hard can it be?" he scoffed. "It's just food. Look, Bailey, I'll pay you. I'll pay your little bakery rate. But I'm desperate. Clara is having a meltdown, and I have half of Stratton's board coming tonight. It has to be perfect. You were always good at perfect." The backhanded compliment stung. Perfect was what he'd called her table settings before he told her she was boring. Perfect was what he'd called her spreadsheets for his taxes before he hired an accountant and told her to focus on the house. "I can't, Martin. I have a major order due tomorrow." "An order for who? The local coffee shop?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Bailey, don't be difficult. This is important. It's for my career. Don't you remember how to be a team player? Just be at the condo by 5. Use the service entrance. And please try to look presentable. Clara's photographer will be there." He hung up before she could say no. She stood in the warm, flour-dusted air of her kitchen, suddenly ice-cold. He hadn't asked. He had told. He still saw her as his assistant, his domestic support staff. The nothing who existed to make his life run smoothly. She looked at the Puits d'Amour order. It was complex, delicate, and required her full attention. It was for a professional client who respected her skill. Then she looked at the text Martin had just sent, 5 p.m. Don't be late. And don't make those little beige cookies you like. Clara wants impactful food. A familiar bitter resentment warred with a lifetime of programmed compliance. Don't be difficult. She put her phone down. She would not go. She had work to do. Real work. But as the hours ticked by, a sick, heavy feeling of dread settled in her stomach. Martin wasn't just arrogant, he was punitive. When they were married, disappointing him had consequences: days of biting silence, accidental cuts to her household allowance, casual cruelty dressed as jokes at dinner parties. He still held the lease on her old car. He was still the guarantor on her apartment, a detail his lawyers had forgotten to change. If she defied him, he could and probably would make her life a living hell. At 4:30 p.m., Bailey Vance, owner of Historic Bakes, put her passion project on hold. She packed 2 chef's coats, her best knives, and went to the grocery store to buy ingredients for impactful food for her ex-husband's new wife. The elevator to Martin and Clara's penthouse was not the one Bailey had once used. The residence elevator was a sleek wood-paneled car with biometric access. The service elevator, which Martin had instructed her to take, was a jarringly different experience. It was fluorescent lit, smelled of industrial cleaner and stale garbage, and vibrated with a low metallic groan. It deposited her in a sterile gray hallway right by the kitchen entrance. She pushed the door open. The kitchen was a monument to minimalist design, white marble reflective surfaces and appliances that looked like they had never been touched. Standing in the middle of it all was Clara Saunders, wrapped in a white silk robe, yelling into her phone. "I don't care if it's a supply chain issue, David," she shrieked. "You find me white orchids or you find a new job. This party is my brand." She snapped her phone shut, her eyes landing on Bailey. They were sharp blue and utterly void of warmth. Clara was, Bailey had to admit, stunning. Her blonde hair was a perfect, expensive cascade, and her body was honed by a discipline Bailey had never possessed. "You're the—" "Bailey," Clara said, her painted-on brow furrowing. She looked Bailey up and down, her simple black slacks, her worn kitchen clogs, the heavy-duty catering boxes. "Martin said you were a lifesaver. You look more like you're here to fix the plumbing." "I'm here to cook," Bailey said, her voice flat. She began unpacking. "Right. Well, the guest list is on the fridge. Don't make anything smelly. Or brown. I want jewel tones. Think caviar, think microgreens. Martin left his credit card. Try not to max it out." Clara waved a manicured hand dismissively and disappeared into the bedroom wing, her silk robe whispering behind her. Bailey was left alone in the vast cold kitchen that had once been her dream. She had designed this kitchen. She had picked the exact cut of Calicotta marble for the island. She had debated for weeks over the Sub-Zero refrigerator versus the Thermidor. Martin had agreed to all of it, and then a week after it was finished, he had told her he wanted a divorce. She got to work. Her movements were automatic, precise. She was a professional. She would do the job, take the money, and leave. She found prosciutto figs and goat cheese starting on appetizers. An hour later, Martin came in already in a tuxedo. He looked impeccable. He didn't look at her, heading straight for the wine fridge. "Smells good," he said, pulling out a bottle of Sancerre. "Martin, we need to talk," Bailey said, not looking up from the tray of canapés she was arranging. "Not now, Bailey. I'm stressed. The entire executive committee is coming." He loosened his bow tie. "This has to be perfect. I have a binding contract for a delivery tomorrow. I can't be here all night. So finish and go." Clara hired servers. He finally looked at her. "Wow, you look tired. Are you eating enough? You should let Clara's girl give you a facial. You're getting those lines." Bailey's knife paused over a fig. Why did you call me Martin? There are hundreds of caterers in New York. Martin took a long sip of his wine. Because you're reliable. And, he gave a short bitter laugh, because you're cheap. And because I knew you'd come. You always do. He left the kitchen. Bailey took a deep shuddering breath and continued to cut the figs. Reliable. Cheap. You always do. The party started at 7 p.m. The apartment filled with a cacophony of loud voices, thumping electronic music, and the clinking of glasses. Bailey stayed in the kitchen, sending out tray after tray of impactful food with the servers Clara had hired. Through the doorway she caught glimpses of the life Martin had built. It was all surfaces, just like the kitchen. Everyone was filming everyone else. Clara was posing dramatically by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her laughter a high, piercing shriek. Martin was glued to the side of an older, distinguished man, Robert Henderson, the CEO of Stratton Financial. Martin was smiling his charming smile, the one he used when he wanted something. Bailey was rinsing a bowl when a server bustled in. "They're devouring those mushroom tarts," the girl said. "Clara's asking for more." "Those weren't on the list," Bailey said, confused. "I didn't make any mushroom tarts. The ones in the little blue box, the really fancy ones." Bailey's blood ran cold. She strode to the walk-in pantry. On the shelf where she had stored it for safekeeping was the insulated container for her other client. The Puits d'Amour. It was open. Half of the delicate 18th century pastries were gone. "No," she whispered. She ran out of the kitchen. She found the tray on the main bar. Guests were grabbing them, popping the intricate pastries into their mouths absent-mindedly. Clara was holding one. "These are bizarre," she said to a friend, "but the camera loves them." "Stop!" Bailey's voice cut through the music. The room went quiet. Martin, in the middle of a story with his boss, froze. All eyes turned to Bailey, standing at the edge of the living room in her flour-dusted apron and clogs. "Clara, put that down, please. Those are not for this party." Clara's eyes widened, her face flushing with anger. "What did you just say to me?" Martin was at her side in an instant, his hand gripping her arm, his fingers digging into her skin. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his smile still plastered on his face for the benefit of his guests. "Those pastries are for another client," Bailey said, her voice shaking but firm. "It's a private order. They're ruined." "They're pastries, Bailey," Martin hissed back, pulling her toward the kitchen. "You can make more. You are embarrassing me. You are embarrassing Clara." "Martin, you don't understand." "No, you don't understand." His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "My entire career is in this room. Robert Henderson is right there. And you walk out yelling like a lunatic over a few cookies. You are the help, Bailey. Now go back to the kitchen, or I swear to God I will call security." He shoved her hard back through the kitchen door. Bailey stumbled, catching herself on the steel counter. The door swung shut, cutting off the returning swell of music. She was shaking not from fear, but from a profound seismic rage. He had called her the help. He had put his hands on her. He had, in his casual arrogance, just destroyed her reputation with a client who had paid her more than Martin had ever offered for a night's work. She ripped off her apron. She grabbed her knives, her bag, and the insulated box containing the few remaining precious Puits d'Amour. She didn't look back. She walked out of the service entrance into the sterile hallway and jabbed the button for the elevator, her knuckles white. She had no idea how she would fix this. She had a client's address, a 6 p.m. delivery time for the next day, and a half-empty box. As the elevator doors closed, she heard the kitchen door swing open. "Bailey," Martin yelled. "You get back here. You're not finished." But the doors slid shut and she was gone. The elevator ride down was a blur of panic. Bailey's hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold her phone. She had to contact the client. But there was no name, no phone number. The order had come through a secure portal paid for by a shell corporation, JT Enterprises. She looked at the address on the order form. It wasn't a residence. It was the Conservatory Ballroom, one of the most exclusive high-security event spaces in Manhattan, notorious for hosting billionaires, politicians, and the occasional royal. Her delivery time was for 6 p.m. Tuesday tomorrow. Martin's party was Monday. Wait. She checked the date on her phone. Monday, October 30th. Then she reread the order. Tuesday, October 31st, 6 p.m. sharp. She had gotten the date wrong. She had mistaken Tuesday for today. In her fluster to deal with Martin, she had mixed up her entire schedule. The Puits d'Amour weren't due for another 24 hours. Relief washed over her so potent it made her knees weak. But it was immediately followed by a new cold dread. She had just publicly humiliated her ex-husband, the man who was the guarantor on her apartment, in front of his boss. She had walked out on a job, albeit one she was bullied into. And she still only had half an order of incredibly complex pastries for a high-paying anonymous client. She couldn't possibly remake them. The dough was a 3-day process. She spent the entire night in a haze of flour and sugar. She could not replicate the full order, but she could perhaps salvage it. She used the remaining pastries, reglazing them, adding intricate sugar work, and supplementing them with another faster but still historic recipe: orange flour macarons from the court of Versailles. She would have to explain the situation, offer a massive refund, and pray they didn't sue her. She slept for 2 hours, her cheek resting on a bag of almond flour, and woke up feeling wrecked. By 5:00 p.m. on Tuesday, she was a nervous wreck. She boxed up the supplemented order, donned her cleanest chef's coat, and took a cab to the Conservatory Ballroom. The building was an imposing limestone fortress off Central Park. Security was, as expected, intense. Name: a man in a black suit with a coiled earpiece, asked, his expression bored. Bailey Vance, Historic Bakes. I have a delivery for JT Enterprises. He scanned his tablet. You're late. The order says 6 p.m., Bailey said, confused. Event start was 5:30. Mr. Thorne's assistant has been asking. Mr. Thorne. The name hit her like a physical blow. Joel Thorne. Bailey felt the blood drain from her face. Joel Thorne wasn't just a billionaire. He was the billionaire. A tech recluse. A legend. He had emerged from nowhere a decade ago and built Thorne Industries, a company that specialized in predictive analytics and clean energy, into a global behemoth. He was intensely private, rarely photographed, and known for a ruthless efficiency that terrified his competitors. And Martin Vance, her ex-husband, was obsessed with him. For the last 2 years of their marriage, Joel Thorne had been the white whale Martin was chasing. Landing the Thorne account. Martin would say, isn't just a promotion, Bailey. It's a legacy. Stratton Financial had been trying to manage Thorne's personal wealth fund for years, and Martin was on the team leading the pitch. And this was the client whose pastries she had let Clara Saunders feed to her C-list influencer friends. Ma'am, the guard said. Right. Yes. Sorry. She was escorted not through a service entrance, but through a secondary VIP hallway. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and old money. They didn't take her to a kitchen. They took her to a private study just off the main ballroom. The room was paneled in dark mahogany. A woman with a severe black bob and a tablet, presumably the assistant, stood by the door. You're here, finally. He's asking for them. Please let me explain, Bailey stammered. There was an incident. My order was partially compromised. I've supplemented it, and I am prepared to offer a full refund, of course. Is this the Puits d'Amour? The assistant interrupted, pointing at the box. Yes, but give it to me. The assistant took the box and walked, not to a serving table, but to a set of large double doors. She slipped inside, leaving Bailey alone in the study. Bailey paced her heart, trying to exit her chest. She was finished. Her tiny business, her only source of income, would be blacklisted by the most powerful man in New York. Martin's threats would be nothing compared to what Joel Thorne's lawyers could do. She waited for 10 minutes. 15. The double doors opened again. The severe assistant looked at her. "Mr. Thorne will see you." "See me?" Bailey whispered. To fire me in person. Just go in." Bailey smoothed her apron, her hands slick with sweat. She pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The main ballroom was breathtaking. It was a sea of black ties and couture gowns. Hundreds of the world's most powerful people were milling about. But they weren't the focus. The focus was a man standing near a small private alcove away from the crowd. He was tall, with dark, unruly hair and an intensity that seemed to suck the air out of his immediate vicinity. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark navy suit, no tie. He was holding one of her pastries. He was staring right at her. "Where?" he said, his voice quiet but carrying across the space. "Did you get this recipe?" Bailey was confused by the question. I'm a food historian. I research historical recipes. That one is from a 1745 manuscript by François Massielot." "No," the man said, taking a step closer. "Joel Thorne." His eyes were a piercing, impossible green. "This specific version, the one with the lavender honey glaze and the hint of burnt citrus. Where did you get that?" "That part, that's not from the manuscript. It's my own. A personal adaptation from when I was in college." Thorne stopped so close she could see the faint scar on his jawline. He looked at her, really looked at her as if he was seeing a ghost. His composure, the famous icy calm, was cracking. "Boston," he whispered. 20 years ago. A cafe called the Daily Grind, just off the MIT campus." Bailey's world tilted. Yes, I worked there. My freshman year." Joel Thorne's face, a mask of unreadable power, suddenly crumpled. He looked at the pastry, then back at her, and a disbelieving, wrecked smile spread across his face. "I knew it," he breathed. "I knew I wasn't crazy. I've been searching for you for 20 years. Bailey's mind was blank. I'm sorry. Do I? No, you knew me," he said, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't place. "You just knew me as Jules, the foster kid who slept behind your bakery's dumpsters." The ballroom, with its glittering chandeliers and the drone of a string quartet, simply dissolved. Bailey was transported 20 years back. She wasn't Bailey Vance, the failed wife. She was Bailey Hayes, a 19-year-old freshman on a partial scholarship working the 4 a.m. opening shift at the Daily Grind. And Jules was the shadow she saw every morning. He was a boy, maybe her age, skeletal and coughing, wrapped in a threadbare army jacket. He was brilliant. She knew that. He was an MIT charity case, a foster kid on a full academic ride who had slipped through the cracks. His stipend hadn't covered housing, and he was too proud to go to the shelters. He wasn't a customer. He'd scavenged the dumpsters for day-old muffins. Bailey, taught by her grandmother that food is just love you can taste, couldn't stand it. She started messing up orders. An extra breakfast sandwich, a burnt batch of scones, and every morning she'd bring him a thermos of hot coffee. "You're going to get fired, Bailey," he'd croaked one snowy morning, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the cup. "Then they'll fire me," she'd said. No one should be hungry. She'd sit with him for 10 minutes before her shift, bundled in her own coat. He'd talk, his voice rough, about algorithms and predictive models, things she didn't understand. She'd listen, and she'd share her own secret. "I'm not a business major," she'd confessed. "I'm a history nerd. I'm testing recipes. Here, try this." She'd given him a small, imperfect pastry. "It's my great-grandmother's recipe, a Puits d'amour, but I add my own twist, lavender honey glaze and a little burnt orange zest. It's my hope recipe. Tastes like sunshine." He'd eaten it like a starving man. He'd told her, his eyes serious, "One day Bailey Hayes people are going to pay $1,000 for this. It's engineered kindness." Then one week he was gone. A campus security guard said he'd flunked out or something. Bailey had felt a pang of loss, hoping he'd found somewhere warm to land. She'd transferred to a different school. The next semester met Martin, and the memory of the starving, brilliant boy named Jules had faded into the background of her new, important life. Now that boy was standing in front of her, wearing a suit that cost more than her apartment. "Jules," she whispered, her hand coming to her mouth. You're Joel Thorne?" "I am," he said, his green eyes scanning her face. "I changed my name. I wanted to cut ties with all of that. When my first algorithm sold, I went back. The cafe was gone. You were gone. I've had PIs searching for Bailey Hayes for a decade. They never found you. Because," he gestured to her apron, "you're Bailey Vance." He looked angry. Not at her, at the name. "Vance, that's your husband." "Ex-husband," Bailey corrected, her voice small. "Right." Joel's focus snapped back. He held up the pastry. "I put out an anonymous request to every high-end bakery in the tri-state area for this pastry. I described it down to the molecular level. You were the only one who answered, the only one who knew." Mr. Thorne, his assistant, Sylvia, interrupted, gliding to his side. "Mr. Henderson from Stratton Financial is here. He's very insistent. He says his VP, Martin Vance, is with him." Bailey's entire body went rigid. "Martin, here, now." Joel's gaze sharpened. "Vance, your ex-husband. He works for Stratton." "He's a junior vice president," Bailey said, the room starting to spin. He's been trying to land your account for years." A slow, dangerous understanding dawned on Joel's face. He looked at Bailey's simple clothes, her worn-out clogs, the smudge of flour on her cheek that she'd missed. "Sylvia," Joel said, his voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze fire. "Get them. Bring them here. And bring me the event photographer." "Sir." "Do it." Sylvia vanished. Joel turned back to Bailey. "Last night, the incident that compromised my order. Tell me." "It was nothing." "Bailey," he said, and the use of her name was a command. "Tell me." "It was my ex-husband's party," she said, the words tumbling out. "He forced me to cater it. His new wife, she mistook your pastries for party food. I tried to stop her. I made a scene. Martin, he was furious." "Furious how?" "He said, he told me I was the help. He said I was embarrassing him in front of his boss. He shoved me back into the kitchen and told me to be quiet." Joel Thorne's face became an expressionless mask. It was the most terrifying look Bailey had ever seen. "I see," he said. The doors to the alcove opened. Sylvia returned, followed by Robert Henderson, the CEO of Stratton, and a beaming, triumphant Martin Vance. "Mr. Thorne," Martin boomed, striding forward, his hand outstretched. "A pleasure. A true pleasure. I'm Martin Vance. I believe my team at Stratton has been—" Martin stopped. He had finally seen Bailey standing next to the billionaire in her same dirty apron from the night before. His smile didn't just fade, it died. It was a complete system failure. His face went from beaming to confused to a sickly pale white. "Bailey," he choked out. What are you doing here? Are you serving?" "She is," Joel Thorne said, his voice resonant. He stepped slightly, putting himself between Bailey and Martin. "Mr. Vance, Mr. Henderson, welcome. I'm glad you're here." Joel picked up one of Bailey's pastries from the box. "Mr. Vance, do you recognize this?" Martin looked at the pastry, then at Bailey, then back. It's one of Bailey's little baking projects. Mr. Thorne, I apologize. I have no idea why she's here bothering you. She's my ex-wife." She's a little confused. Bailey, you need to leave. Now, go. Use the service exit. He was trying to dismiss her. From Joel Thorne's party. She's not leaving, Joel said. He took a bite of the pastry. This, Mr. Vance, is the taste of hope. A baking project that this woman, your ex-wife, used to make for me when I was homeless and freezing to death 20 years ago. Robert Henderson's head snapped toward Martin. Martin's mouth opened, but no sound came out. While I was a starving student at MIT, Joel continued, his voice ringing with clarity. This woman, Bailey Hayes, saved my life. Not with a check, not with a connection, with her own hands, with her own food, with her own quiet dignity. He turned to the now crouching photographer. Are you getting this? He turned back to Martin. Last night you hosted a party. You were desperate to impress me, I'm told. And this woman, this same woman, was in your kitchen. And you called her the help. You told her she was nothing. You put your hands on her and shoved her out of sight because you were embarrassed by her. Martin was hyperventilating. No. I didn't know. I didn't know she knew you. That, Joel said, is the entire problem. You knew her. You were married to her. You lived with this quality of person, this level of character, and you threw it away because it was quiet, because it wasn't impactful. He looked at Robert Henderson. Stratton Financial has been pitching to manage my personal fund, a fund valued at $90 billion. Your presentation was adequate, but Thorne Industries has a zero-tolerance policy for partners with a character deficit. He pointed a finger at Martin. Any man who can look at this woman, and here he gently took Bailey's hand, and see nothing, is a man who cannot see value. He cannot see potential. He cannot see anything but his own reflection. And a man like that, he looked back at Henderson, will never ever touch a dollar of my money. Robert Henderson looked at Martin Vance with a gaze of pure, unadulterated fury. Martin, you're finished. No. Martin lunged forward, not at his boss, but at Bailey. Bailey! Tell him it was a misunderstanding. We were married. Tell him I'm a good man, Bailey. Please. Bailey looked at the man she had loved, the man who had systematically dismantled her self-worth for a decade. She looked at his desperate, terrified face, and she felt nothing. The echo was finally gone. She pulled her hand from his grasp. He's right, Martin. She said, her voice clear and strong for the first time in years. You didn't know he was Joel Thorne, but you knew I was Bailey, and that should have been enough. The flash of the photographer's camera went off, capturing the exact moment Martin Vance's world ended. The silence that followed Bailey's words was absolute. It was a vacuum sucking all the air and noise from the opulent ballroom. Martin Vance stood frozen, his hands still outstretched, his face a mask of grotesque, uncomprehending horror. Robert Henderson, a man known for his composure, looked as if he'd swallowed acid. Joel Thorne didn't smile. His victory was not celebratory, it was a judgment. He wrapped a protective arm around Bailey's shoulders. Sylvia, he called over his shoulder, please have security escort Mr. Vance and Mr. Henderson out. Their invitations are revoked. No, Martin finally roared, a desperate animal sound. Henderson, wait. It's a lie. She's a nobody, a vindictive broke baker. She's manipulating you. Mr. Vance. Joel's voice was arctic. You are in my home. You are accusing my guest of being a liar. You have exactly 10 seconds to remove yourself before my security does it for you. And trust me, he added, they are not as gentle as I am. Two towering men in black suits materialized from the crowd. They each took one of Martin's arms. Martin's composure shattered completely. He became a flailing, pleading mess. Robert, don't listen to him. It's the account. We can fix this, Clora. Clora knows people. Get him out. Henderson snapped at the security guards, his face purple. He shot one last venomous look at Martin. "Don't bother coming in tomorrow, Vance. Or ever. You're done." They dragged Martin Vance, still protesting, still screaming Bailey's name, from the ballroom. The heavy doors closed, muffling his shouts. The entire ballroom had been watching. Now a low, shocked murmur rippled through the most powerful room in New York. Joel Thorne, the recluse. The myth had just publicly executed a man's career. Joel ignored them all. He turned his full attention to Bailey, his expression softening instantly. "Are you all right?" Bailey was shaking. She had just witnessed a public crucifixion, and she was the one who had unintentionally handed Joel the nails. I think so. That was intense." "That," Joel said, "was pest control." He guided her away from the center of the room toward the alcove where her pastries were still sitting. He picked up another one, the orange flower macaron. "Versailles, 1682, Bailey said automatically, her nerves still firing. "A failed attempt to replicate an Italian recipe for the Dauphin. The orange flower water was my addition." Joel smiled a real, genuine smile that transformed his severe face. "You're still doing it. You're still a history nerd." "I am." She finally smiled back, a small, watery gesture. "It's all I ever wanted to do. Historic bakes. It's my little company. Or it was. I'm guessing after tonight." "After tonight," Joel interrupted gently, "it's about to get a lot bigger." "Mr. Thorne." A new voice, sharp and authoritative. A woman from Forbes magazine holding a press badge and a recorder pushed through the crowd. "That was the most shocking thing we've seen all year. Who is this woman?" The entire ballroom seemed to lean in. The string quartet had given up. Joel Thorne turned to the crowd. He wasn't addressing the reporter. He was addressing everyone. He raised his voice, and it carried the easy authority of a man who never had to repeat himself. "For those of you who were distracted," he said, "I would like to introduce my guest of honor." He pulled Bailey forward, his hand resting respectfully on the small of her back. She was painfully aware of her apron, her clogs, her unstyled hair standing next to this icon of power. "This is Ms. Bailey Hayes," he said pointedly, using her maiden name. 20 years ago, when I was indisposed, she was the only human being on the planet who showed me kindness. She didn't have money. She didn't have power. She had a 4 a.m. baking shift and a coat she probably couldn't afford. And she shared what she had with a complete stranger. He gestured around the room. "We are all here tonight for the launch of the Thorne Foundation's new global initiative. You all thought it was another tech incubator. You were wrong." He locked eyes with Bailey. "The Thorne Foundation is launching the Hayes Initiative for Culinary Preservation, a $500 million endowment dedicated to finding funding and preserving historical food arts and supporting small, independent artisans. The very people, the very history, that corporate greed is trying to erase." Bailey's knees gave out. She grabbed his arm for support. "Joel, 500. What? I've been looking for the person to run it," he said softly, for her alone. "I had a team looking. I just didn't know I was looking for you." He turned back to the room, his voice booming. "Ms. Hayes is the architect of that kindness, and she will be the architect of this foundation. She will be its new co-chair, effective immediately." The Forbes reporter was scribbling frantically. "Co-chair. But Mr. Thorne, what is she to you? An old flame. A relative." Joel looked at Bailey, his gaze so intense it was almost a physical weight. He saw the years of being dismissed, of being called nothing. He saw the strength that had allowed her to survive a man like Martin Vance. He put his hand over hers, the one still clutching his arm. "An old flame. A relative," he repeated, a low laugh in his chest. "No, that's far too simple." He turned to the reporter, but his eyes were on Bailey. "She is the co-chair of my foundation. She is the soul of my new global initiative. And she is without any question or competition my most precious woman." The room erupted. Flashbulbs went off like a volley of gunfire, capturing the image that would be on the cover of every business and society journal by morning: the recluse billionaire, holding the hand of the unknown baker in the flour-dusted apron, looking at her like she was the only thing in the room. The fallout from that night was not a quiet ripple. It was a detonation. By the time Bailey woke up the next morning in a guest suite at Joel's penthouse that was larger than her entire apartment after Sylvia had gently but firmly insisted she not go home to her insecure walk-up. Her name was the most searched term on Google. Her photo was everywhere. The baker and the billionaire. Thorne's most precious woman revealed. The $500 million kindness meet Bailey Hayes. Her phone, which she'd left on silent, had 312 missed calls. The first was from her mother, crying with confusion and joy. The next 100 were from reporters. But the most interesting ones were the last 50, all from the same number, Clara Saunders Vance. Interspersed with the calls were a string of increasingly frantic texts. 4:08 a.m. Bailey, what the hell did you do? 4:15 a.m. Martin just got home. He's not okay. You did this. 5:30 a.m. Robert Henderson called Martin and fired him. Via text. Fired him. 6:15 a.m. Bailey, our accounts are frozen. Stratton is clawing back his unvested stock. The firm is distancing itself. 7:00 a.m. He's being investigated. They're doing an audit on his expenses. Bailey, he used the corporate card for our party. He said it was a client acquisition event. 7:30 a.m. He's blaming you. He's saying you set him up. 8:00 a.m. Please. Bailey, you know Joel Thorne. You have to call him. Tell him to stop this. You've ruined us. You've ruined me. My brand is tied to him. I'm losing followers. Bailey read the texts, her coffee growing cold. She felt a distant clinical pity. Clara wasn't an evil person. She was just a shallow one. And shallow people drown in deep water. She texted back a single simple reply. I did not do this. Martin did. I'm sorry for the position he put you in. I wish you well. She blocked the number. A quiet knock came at her door. It was Joel, dressed not in a suit but in jeans and a simple black sweater. He looked like Jules again, just healthier. Morning, he said. The world is loud today. It is, Bailey agreed, clutching her mug. Sylvia's handling the press. I've also had my legal team contact your landlord. Your lease is being transferred to my corporate holdings. The car Martin held over you. It's paid off and the title is being overnighted to you. You are, as of 900 a.m., completely untangled from Martin Vance. Bailey sat down, overwhelmed. Joel, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, yeah, he said, sitting across from her. He used those things to control you. I will not have the co-chair of my foundation be controlled by anyone, especially not by him. He slid a thick folder across the table. This is the preliminary brief for the Hayes Initiative. If you want it. There's no pressure, Bailey. What I said last night, it was impulsive, but it was true. This is yours to run if you want the job. You shoved me into the kitchen, she said suddenly, the memory from Martin's party surfacing. Joel looked confused. What? No, Martin, she corrected. Martin shoved me. He said I was embarrassing him. He'd done it before. Not always a shove, sometimes a tight grip. Sometimes a joke in front of friends that was designed to make me feel small. Bailey's burning the roast again, God love her. Bailey lost her wallet. She'd lose her head if it wasn't attached. I just got used to it. I got used to being nothing. She looked at Joel, her eyes clear. I don't know anything about running a foundation, Jules. You know everything that matters, he countered, leaning forward. You know how to see people. You know the value of something that isn't measured in stock tickers. I have 100 people at Thorne Industries who can run logistics and manage spreadsheets. I don't have anyone with your soul." He pointed to the folder. "The job is simple. You travel the world. You find the Bailey Hayes of the baking world, the cheese-making world, the brewing world. You find the artisans who are preserving history, and you give them the one thing they don't have: capital. You protect them. You tell their story." She opened the folder. The first page was a proposed budget. The numbers were staggering. But the second page was a list of locations: Provence, France; Kyoto, Japan; Oaxaca, Mexico; the Scottish Highlands. It was a map of her dreams. "When do I start?" she asked. 6 months passed. The world of Bailey Vance was unrecognizable. The world of Bailey Hayes was for the first time in perfect focus. She was in Lyon, France, in the kitchen of a boulangerie that had been run by the same family since 1790. She was wearing an apron, but it was a different one. She was here not as the help, but as a benefactor. She was documenting the 90-year-old patriarch's method for a perfect 72-hour levain, her hands deftly moving to capture the dough. The Hayes Initiative was filming a documentary series, and Bailey was its host and creative director. She was no longer the nothing woman. She was, as the New York Times had dubbed her, the matron of lost tastes. Her quiet confidence, her deep academic knowledge, and her genuine empathy had made her an unlikely global icon. She had cut her hair. The mousy brown was gone, replaced by a warm, confident auburn. The lines Martin had worried about were still there, but now they were laugh lines. She was by every measure radiant. She finished the shoot and checked her email. There was one from Sylvia. Subject FYI. Closure attached was a news clipping. Former Finance VP Martin Vance sentenced. Bailey clicked the link. After his firing, the audit at Stratton Financial had uncovered a hornet's nest. Martin hadn't just used the corporate card for Clora's party. He'd been embezzling for years small amounts at first to fund the life Clora demanded. He was arrogant, and he'd assumed no one would ever check the books of a star like him. He was sentenced to 3 years in a minimum security prison. The article had a final devastating line. His wife, former influencer Clora Saunders, filed for divorce last month. She was not present at the sentencing. Bailey closed the browser. She felt no triumph, no schadenfreude, just a profound, quiet sadness for the man he could have been and the man he had chosen to become. She flew back to New York that evening. Joel had asked her to dinner. It wasn't a rare occurrence. They met weekly to discuss the foundation. But this felt different. He'd booked a private room at a small, unassuming restaurant in the village, the kind of place Martin would have hated. "You heard the news?" Joel asked, sipping his water. "I did," Bailey said. "I'm not happy about it." "I know," he said. "That's why I wanted to see you, to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine, Jules, truly. That part of my life feels like a different person lived it." "Good." He paused, a rare vulnerability on his face. "Bailey, the Foundation's 1-year gala is next week. The one you planned. The press will be there. They're going to ask the same question they asked last time." "What question?" "What is she to you?" Bailey looked at him. Their relationship had been professional. Deeply respectful, incredibly close, but professional. He was her boss and her oldest friend. "And what will you tell them?" she asked softly. "I'm tired of telling them," he said. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. His skin was warm. "I want to show them. But only if you feel the same way." Bailey looked at their hands, his strong and scarred from a life she couldn't imagine. Hers dusted with flour and ink. They fit. "Jules," she said, her voice trembling just a little. "For 20 years I've been trying to prove I was worth something. To Martin, to his family, to myself. When I was with you, I was just Bailey. And when you were with me, You were just Jules. It was the only time in my life I wasn't trying. I was just being. Be with me, Bailey, he said, his voice raw. Not as a co-chair, not as a ghost from the past. Just be. She turned her hand over and laced her fingers with his. Okay, Jules. Okay. The gala a week later was the polar opposite of the event at the conservatory. It was warm, held in the New York Public Library, and the guests of honor were not billionaires. They were the artisans Bailey had funded. A cheesemonger from Vermont, a weaver from Peru, a baker from Lyon. Bailey, in a stunning deep green gown, gave the keynote speech. She spoke of the importance of quiet work, of invisible history, and of the power of honoring the small. She didn't mention Martin. She didn't have to. When she finished, the room gave her a standing ovation. Joel walked on stage. He didn't go to the podium. He walked straight to her. The room, remembering the flashbulbs of the year before, went silent. The Forbes reporter was in the front row. Mr. Thorne, she called out, unable to help herself. 1 year later, the question stands, who is she to you? Joel. Thorne smiled. He took Bailey's hand. He leaned into the microphone. She's still my co-chair. She's still the soul of this foundation. Then he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, his eyes never leaving hers. But tonight, he said, his voice soft, but carrying in the hushed room, she is and will always be my date, my partner, and my most precious woman. He didn't need to say anything else. Bailey Hayes, the nothing wife, stepped off the stage hand in hand with the man who had seen her value when she was quite literally giving away her last crumbs. She wasn't just a somebody, she was everything. And that right there is how Bailey Hayes learned the most important lesson. Being nothing to the wrong person just means you are everything to the right one. Martin Vance saw value in noise, in followers, and in surfaces. Joel Thorne saw value in character, in quiet kindness, and in substance. What did you think of Martin's downfall? Was it karma, or was it just the inevitable result of a life lived in arrogance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, and if you believe that quiet kindness is its own kind of superpower, please do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this video with someone in your life who might need a reminder of their own worth. And most importantly, if you want more true life drama stories like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for listening, and remember, never let anyone make you feel like nothing